Today we are here to discuss on the interfaith community and human building as part of the Gandhi-King Global Initiative. How is Gandhi-King related to this interfaith? Both Gandhi and King, before they were social reformers, before they were activists, before they were politicians, they were spiritualists. Both were seekers of truth. Truth is defined in Sanskrit. Trikala Bhajyam Satyam. Satyam means truth. Trikala Bhajyam means the one that doesn't change in past, present and future. The one that remains in past, present and future. Which is only God only. The oneness only. Unity only. So Gandhi's life is in search of truth. Because at one point he said, if I have to choose between non-violence or if I have to choose between freedom from British and truth, I will seek truth, he said. Because he was a truth seeker first and then anything else. And so is Martin Luther King, truth. And what is this truth ultimately is oneness and unity in creation. Not just we start talk about oneness of humanity, they go much beyond that. Oneness of all the elements, earth, fire, water, everything in the nature, absolute oneness. For me it is very easy to imagine this oneness because as a physician we know this body made of 200 trillion cells starts from that one cell, one primordial cell, pluripotential primordial cell divides into 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64 and kept going and going to make this body of 200 trillion cells. But these 200 trillion cells are in some way connected to that one cell. They work as one cell only. If you take this to the macrocosm, this is the microcosm. Macrocosm, the whole universe is the same way. We are also one cell in the body of the cosmos. We are connected. That is the absolute truth. So, while we know that now intellectually, to realize that and living in that reality is our goal. When you live in that reality, your thought process, your words, your actions change. When you are feeding the hungry, you are not feeding the hunger in the other person. You are satisfying your hunger. When you hurt somebody, parahimsa, it becomes swahimsa. You are hurting yourself because the other person is an extension of you. We see that in mothers. When a child gets a pinprick and hurt, the mother immediately feels the pain. She leaves everything else and runs after the child as if she felt the pain. Because the child is an extension of that mother. So similarly, this spirituality is an expansion process. Spirituality is a dissolving process of our limited boundaries around us into full expansion and expansion and expansion further and further and further to the universal oneness. So that is what is behind. When we talk about satyagraha, when we talk about non-violence, you talk about any of this, human rights, civil rights, any of these things can be narrowed down to why. When we question why civil rights, why universal human rights, why non-violence, Why satyagraha? When we question why, because the answer comes because we are one. That is the fundamental basis for all that. That means, so why did so many religions have come? What are religions? What is spirituality? Sanatana Dharma defines religion as an activity of mind. As long as there are many minds, many fasts will develop, many religions will come. They are like the rivers. But all these rivers drain into the same ocean of oneness and divinity, end up in divinity. These are different pathways. But these rivers travel in the different geographical regions and they acquire the taste and smell and the color of the land it flows. So some have Indian colors, some has Arabic colors, some has European colors, European smell. That means each one caters to certain needs of different geographical area. And then ultimately when it merges into the mighty ocean of divinity, oneness and unity, they lose their individual identities of separateness. So that is what we call unity of religions. That people who dive deep in their own religions, those who are superficial, they feel that they are different. But the ones who dive deep, they realize the oneness of divinity. That is the essence or the essential aspect of today's discussion. But why some have this exclusivity, meaning as if they have a patent for divinity. These are human weaknesses that makes religion a business. These are business houses that they want to promote their product. In order to promote their product, they have to claim they have some exclusivity. Unlike anything else, they are very special. This is the beginning of the problem between people and people. When I say I am special, I am different, I am better than you, that's the beginning of the problems. So with this, the effort today is to see this commonality, and that's the discussion where our different panelists will be presenting their own views. We have a distinguished group of panelists here. I am Raghavendra Prasad. I am a medical doctor, a geriatrician taking care of elderly people. And I am retired 10 years ago. But I am also a spiritualist. And I am moderating here today to this panel towards this direction that I mentioned to you. And today we have Linda Hess. She is in the Department of Religious Studies at Stanford for the last 21 years. And she retired 2017. And she stayed in India for a long time. And she is an exponent of, she translated several works of Kabir. She already shared some. Kabir is he has the same qualities what I described. Like Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, he realized divinity through Hinduism, he realized divinity through Christianity, he realized divinity through Islam also, and proved unity of religions. So is Kabir. He's both a Hindu as well as a Muslim. He's a Muslim, but he always wrote poetry on Rama, in praise of Rama. So he is considered revered by both Muslims in India and Hindus. And she spent quite a bit of her time in this search. So she is an exponent of religious prospects of violence and non-violence, war and peace, Hindus and Muslims, Gandhi, thought and non-violence, Gandhi and his legacy, and she is also spent some time on Peace Justice Studies Initiative. Please welcome Linda Hess.
So I am here filling in for Mark Andrus, who unfortunately suffered a stroke just a few days ago. Just one second. So I just wrote my comments. I'm just opening them up.
Linda,
yeah.
Louder.
Okay. Just wave a finger if I forget to be loud, okay? Yeah, so Mark Andrus is the Episcopal Bishop of the Diocese of California and has long been active in peace and justice issues, climate crisis, immigration, civil rights, healthcare, and so on. And I presume he would have spoken about his intertwining commitments in religious and social political realms. I'll be offering a different kind of reflection rather than speaking of my own religious practice and its expression in the fields of peace and justice, which is also a topic in my life. I'll be sharing with you my experience as an educator, teaching about the history and practice of religion at the institution we're sitting in. First, you should know that I have a lifelong keen interest in violence and nonviolence. Came up in childhood and continued from a young age. Clay Carson and I were both among the hundreds of thousands who stood in front of Martin Luther King in Washington in 1963 when he gave that famous speech. This strong personal interest in violence and nonviolence also affected how I went about my work teaching in a university. Gandhi said in his autobiography, not quite an exact quote, but close, "Those who say religion has nothing to do with politics do not understand either religion or politics." I'll just say that I agree with Gandhi in that I believe that studying religion as if it were apolitical, too pure for politics somehow, is naive and misses very important realities about the history of religions. My own work in India and my teaching, my own work, as Dr. Prasad has said, has been in India. And my teaching field at Stanford was religions of South Asia. In India, the population is roughly 80-ish% Hindu, 14% Muslim, smaller but significant numbers of Jains, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, Zoroastrians, and indigenous religions that don't have a name other than indigenous religions that I know of. A very small remaining community of Jews. Here at Stanford, I taught many kinds of courses on religious histories, texts, deities, doctrines, practice, poetry, epics, music, performance, which didn't necessarily have a strong political bent. Even if they didn't foreground political questions, they were often aware of political contestations and interpretations that reflected social and political realities of their times. But as I've said, I had a personal preoccupation with violence and nonviolence. And by the way, I'm convinced that if we want to study nonviolence and learn what it is and how to live it, we also have to study violence hand in hand. We have to understand it deeply, including its presence in ourselves. So, one takeaway, maybe the main takeaway from this 10-minute presentation, is that I would like the entwined study of violence and nonviolence to have much more presence at Stanford and other universities, touching on many disciplines. I worked on developing this kind of study in religion, and in the last few years that I was here, in something which the doctor mentioned, the Peace and Justice Studies Initiative, I tried to find a way with colleagues to institutionalize the systematic, multidisciplinary study of violence and nonviolence. I did not succeed in this. We did not succeed. If there's time, or during the discussion period, we can reflect on why we didn't succeed. Now I'd just like to tell you a little about the courses I developed and in my own department, and some that I tried to encourage to happen in other fields. My job description at Stanford did not include the study of violence and nonviolence, but Gandhi gave me an opening to develop courses in that field, because my field was religions of South Asia and India particularly. Many aspects of Gandhi's personality and theory of nonviolence, as you know, were formed from religious sources and were discussed in religious terms by him, sometimes to the consternation of his colleagues like Nehru. They said, could you just downplay the religion a little bit? But no. But he had a very unique and vivid and particular understanding of what religion means. And for him, morality was at the forefront of what religion means. And also, as Dr. Prasad said, the search for truth, which he ultimately defined as synonymous with God. So first I created a course called Gandhi and Non-Violence. It still looked like it was sort of in my field. In 2008, Clay Carson and I co-taught a course on Gandhi and King, and then we led a summer seminar in India where students traveled and learned about Gandhi and his legacies. I developed some very wide-ranging courses, for instance, one that I called Religious Perspectives on Violence and Nonviolence, War and Peace, where we had guest lecturers who spoke about really fascinating topics in a variety of religions, but we were careful not to have them just say, here's what Islam thinks about violence and nonviolence. Here's what Christianity. We didn't do that. We had them talk very specifically about some specific topic or moment in history, the Crusades, religious attitudes toward the death penalty, and so on. And that, we opened the lectures up to the public as well as offering it as a course. Another course I created was called Hindus and Muslims in South Asia, which examined communal identities, both harmonious coexistence and conflict. Finally, I developed my most far-reaching course, which was called Gandhi's Legacy, Violence and Nonviolence in the World and in Ourselves. And that continued for several years until I retired. I'd like to tell you, and this will be the rest of whatever I say, more about this course. And first I'll tell you how it was born. It was born at a kind of awakening moment that sometimes happens in a teaching career, you know, in a teaching experience or in a student experience. In the course called Hindus and Muslims in South Asia, we were studying partition, which, as most of you would know, was a horrendous period which ended in the partition of India and Pakistan, the tragic side of the final winning of independence from colonial rule. And it included a genocide where people from both side that had Hindus and Sikhs and the side that had Muslims were brutally killing each other and doing other terrible things. And the largest displacement in history, maybe 2 million people displaced. So we were studying partition. We used different kinds of sources. We used conventional history. We used oral history of people who had lived through it. And we used film, that is narrative film. Conventional history was full of facts, arguments, categories, concepts. These are all important to learn. Oral history brought us something new and different, stunning first-person accounts of what happened to people, what they did, and what was done to them. The film added something else that was very powerful. It drew us deeply into the emotional realities of characters we could identify with. When we study genocides and other terrible episodes in human history, people always ask, how could people do such things? Students ask that. We feel we could never do such things, especially to people who had been our neighbors and friends for years. We can't imagine doing it. We like to think it's a historical anomaly, something utterly abnormal, caused by the evil politicians or the troublemakers from over the hills there, or a kind of temporary insanity that somehow seizes people. But the combination of the film, which was Earth by Deepa Mehta, oral history and academic history showed us something else. One day a student seemed to have a sudden awakening. She said, "Oh, it's us. It's ordinary people just like us, good people. We would do these things under similar circumstances." And then another student immediately said, "How can we prepare ourselves? How can we learn not to fall into these patterns of horrible communal hate and violence in circumstances like that?" And this question is very relevant and urgent today, right now in the United States and in India. Someone else then followed up with a startling statement immediately. "Mere academic study is useless for this, or at least it's not enough. We need something that goes deeper, that touches character, that can be personally transformative." So that was when I decided to develop a course with an unusual structure. We had 3 meetings a week. 2 were the academic study, and they've ranged very broadly. But 1 was a 2-hour experiential workshop for which we had leaders who specialized in various approaches that would bring forth personal exploration and awareness. They included nonviolent communication, approaches to storytelling, ethnic histories, multi-generational trauma, something called theater of the oppressed, sociological scenarios, and meditation on compassion, including self-compassion. We wrote analytical papers, we wrote personal reflections. One exercise, for example, was to carry out and write about their own experiments with truth after reading Gandhi's autobiography, which he called The Stories of My Experiments with Truth. So I conclude with a few bullet points on what we learned, what I see that we learned from these classes and the larger institutional picture. 1, to study nonviolence, we must study violence. We must investigate what violence is, how it exists on all levels, from the personal and psychological to the structural, political, and economic. We, good people in this room and in my classroom, we are not separate from violence looking in from the outside. We all have violence and aggression inside ourselves in subtle and not so subtle forms. In order to enter the light of kindness, justice, and love, we must be willing to look and understand the darkest sides of human nature. 2, students are hungry to make connections between academic study and their own experience, to integrate intellectual knowledge with embodied knowledge that embraces feeling and creative imagination from both outer and inner perspectives. This means historical, academic, and analytical study on one side and personal experiential exploration on the other. We need to look at hard political realities and tender inner realities. And I believe it's possible to do both, to create both rigor in intellectual inquiry and a sense of safety in personal exploration. This is what we tried to do in this course. 3, students are eager to learn about nonviolence, to receive knowledge that's inspiring and empowering, that will help them create a better world and a life for themselves that's not enmeshed in cruelty and in destruction, but in kindness and enhancement of life for all. But at Stanford and many other institutions, they get very little opportunity to study these things in depth. They can learn a lot about wars, military power, something they call security, economics in a capitalist frame, and so on. But while working with a group called the Peace and Justice Studies Initiative, I developed a number of course outlines that would introduce students to knowledge that wasn't available in the curriculum. One was called Nonviolence in Theory and Practice. One was called The History of Pacifism and Conscientious Objection in the U.S. One was called Ethics in Animals. One was called Training for War and Peace. And we also pointed out the potential in every field, from literature and art to computer science, for study of nonviolence. We didn't succeed in establishing a system for this kind of curriculum. Some of us were passionate about it, taught such courses, but we realized that much more needed to be put into place in order for such a curriculum and a program to last at an institution like Stanford. So I don't know, I've probably ended my time, so later, if you want to hear some statements from students about their experience in this course, we can read them out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we are supposed to hold our questions, right?
Towards the end.
Yes.
Okay, we'll decide how much time is left and then we can. The next presenter is Manjula Kumar. She is an exponent on Sufism, and she is an educator, actor, director, filmmaker, has multiple roles, and she worked for 30 years at Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. And please welcome Manjula Kumar.
Good morning. Namaste. Good morning. What an honor. I'm so delighted to be here. My first time at Stanford, across from the East Coast. And the very fact that Stanford, for the first time, is doing this conference on Gandhi-Ji itself makes it a very important, and all the people that have participated, and we had such a moving opening with members of the Gandhi family sharing anecdotes with us. So it's really a very high-powered and a critically important conference for all of us. And our bit being about interfaith, I just want to put in a little plug about myself. I was born in Kolkata, but I grew up in Delhi, the capital city of India. Post-partition, we call ourselves the Midnight's children. Yes, the country was, in a way, bleeding. The country, we people, I remember my parents, trying to find the Indian identity. But for me, in my childhood, I had a Samina and a Judy and, Kamla and all. We were all friends. We were close friends, sharing a childhood, but none of us really focused on the other. What religion is she and what does she practice? In fact, it was so encouraging to go and celebrate Eid and go to the Gurudwara and go. I went to a convent, so in the morning we did our religious studies, Hail Mary, Mother of God, and at home there was Krishna Puja, and there was never a conflict. It was an enriching life, and there weren't these divisions that have come either later or forced on us or whatever. So that's the childhood I remember in India. And then I came to London as a student and had to rethink, where I'm from, my roots. I'm bringing my roots to another, almost an alien society. And yet again, we were called colored people, but it was not the faith, it was not the religion that was being used to put one against the other. And this is my third incarnation, Delhi, London, Washington. And I feel very, very blessed that I've had 30 years at Smithsonian, which is one of the world's largest museum complex, but an educational institution. And I found a path that instead, yes, it's very important, for universities to have these teaching courses and reach fresh minds in a theoretical, through lectures, and what you've done beyond that. But at the Smithsonian, we've used exhibitions, public programmings, lectures, book reading, so many different formats to educate people about different religions, about different cultures, which I think culture becomes a little more acceptable, more palatable to start a conversation. and then I remember one of the earliest plays that we had done was Mahatma versus Gandhi, and in English, but people who were interested in theater, people who were interested in poetry, came to see the play and therefore learned about Mahatma Gandhi, went away and then read more about him and had discussions. So it's learning and education from a different point of view, and more because you want to. You want to enrich yourself, through different formats, etc. This conference, I know we've all been thinking, talking. Yes, people have read about the Mahatma, what he stood for, but we're also asking what is for the next generation. How do we pass on the legacy? How do we continue? How do we bring attention to his real teachings? And for me, really Mahatma Gandhi needed more than ever before in the entire world, not just India, but here certainly. And his teachings, they're really more for people like me who grew up right from childhood. Mahatma Gandhi, photos and films and books, and it's been part of our psyche. But I read his teachings, and they have much, much more meaning, much more resonance, and a much more need today. Just making, the deep impact on youth, his values, principles, ideals. In one word, if we were to take all his teachings, it's humanity. Humanity, and his life, his entire life was a service to humanity. And for many a times, the cynical me takes over, and then I have to remind myself. And he said, you must not lose faith in humanity. Humanity is an ocean. If a few drops of the ocean are dirty, the ocean does not become dirty. And that is something so applicable to what's happening today everywhere. And I have to sort of keep, and we are really the ocean, so we will not allow to be dirtied. And truth, satyagraha, and he said truth is like a vast tree which yields more and more fruit the more you nurture it. And we could go on and on with Gandhiji's teachings. His principal teaching of non-violence. Growing up we said, non-violence is a dumb thing and it's part of it, but it's not a dumb thing. His non-violence at that time defied the British Raj. But the strategy actually is much more applicable today. Look at the gun violence in this country. Many a night I ask myself, if Gandhiji was around here today, how would he handle the gun violence in this country? Gandhiji taught us all about the power of love. I wonder if there was a gun and he would be able to get over the power of the gun with his love. And he said, remember, all through history, there have been tyrants and murderers. And for a time, they may seem invincible, but in the end, they always fall. We have to believe in that. And then Gandhiji's compassion, of course, and he taught us that compassion needs to be bolstered by action, and action underlined by compassion. Gandhiji taught us the importance of duty to one's family, community, country, and it is only when we practice duty that we can earn rights. Try teaching that to our children. These are my rights, so what happens to your duty? And you have to say duty first, and then maybe rights. He envisioned a world where every citizen has dignity and prosperity. And under that comes all that we talk about, social justice and equality and dignity of labor. He also taught us simplicity. He used ordinary objects for major political and social change. The charkha for, the spinning wheel, khadi. That is something our very, very materialistic world needs to look at, needs to learn from, and perhaps create another more meaningful way of life and a world. Of course, as I said, equality, social justice, and education. Education for all. And here we are in all parts of the world. We are talking about education being available to all at all levels. We're still fighting in this country with, I don't particularly like the word, but we are facing the challenges of making this available in many, many ways. The first to bring attention in India and abroad was women's empowerment. These words were not coined, but he did it. He set examples for men and women, to follow. Gandhiji was an environmentalist way before it became a term. It was his way of life, the natural living. He believed in planting trees, and when we have a Greta Thunberg today, and who has come out of the degradation of the environment and now said, let's look at environment. But here's another thing that I want to put across to our audience. So it took a 16-year-old to shake the world to talk about environmentalism, and where did that come from? Where did the nurturing of that Greta come from? An education system, the adults, the parents, the educators of a society, of a school system. It didn't just happen like that, but she is a trailblazer, she's a torchbearer who's starting a movement that should have been perhaps done a long time ago. Gandhiji promoted vegetarianism, and that also has spread to the West, realizing not just a fad, or not even just a way of life, but because it's a healthier way of living. And that's why it's being adopted by the West. And then there's yoga, meditation, and we can go on and on that he exemplified in his life as well. Gandhiji said we must teach our children, since it's an interfaith panel, we must teach our children to understand and respect and appreciate religious differences. In many of our writings, whether it's in newspapers or television and all, the term religious tolerance is used. And I often say, no, it's not just a tolerance. You don't just tolerate people. You have to understand, appreciate, and then begin to love also. And finally, what makes it so much more pertinent to the world, Gandhiji said, freedom of press is a privilege no country can forego. Reporters, general public, and even international press. And way even at that time, Gandhiji was promoting the learning of languages, Sanskrit, Hindi, English, Urdu, Persian, Arabic. Learning of languages was another equalizer, another way of bringing communities together, of building on to, And I'd like to just end with my mantra, which is one of my favorite prayers of Gandhiji. And he says, let him be whosoever he may be, whether Vishnu or Mahadev, Brahma or Indra, sun or moon, Lord Buddha or Mahavir, obeisance be ever only to him who is free from the poisonous effect of desire and anger, one who is filled with compassion for all life, and one who is purified by a perfectly virtuous life. And this was Gandhiji, and as I was introduced, I, in my work, believe in spreading, promoting the understanding between religions, Gandhiji's teachings, through the arts. And if you mentioned Sufism, I did a 2-day symposium at the Smithsonian, and as you might expect, it wasn't just the Muslims coming to look at the dervish dances and all. It was mainstream, non-Muslim coming to find out and be educated. And that's what the platform of whether it's the play we did, we celebrate Gandhiji's birthday every year. We have a wonderful Gandhi Center in Washington, D.C., a functioning Gandhi Center. It's not just a library. I bring professors from all over the East Coast to do symposia, through lectures, through films, and I was wondering which film Stanford had shown. And through paintings. One of the Indian artists, he's now internationally known, lives and works in Washington, D.C. He has created a series of paintings, and they're called cultural crossings. So when you look at the painting, they're just lines with a synagogue, a temple, a gurudwara, a mosque, mandir, because only the architecture is different from the top. And all the lines go to one point. And this series of paintings is now at the Corcoran Gallery in Washington, D.C. But once these are my work and my the thing is, passion for it is that you bring, it's not just to hang there. You have to bring people to talk about it, talk about multiculturalism, talk about how all these different religions are pointing to one point. You called me a filmmaker. I just almost finished making a film called An Ode to Multiculturalism, an ode to Washington, D.C., celebrating multiculturalism. And right in that, it's a very small city. DC is a very small city, but we have Iranians and Pakistanis and Indians and all celebrating cultures through dance and music and painting and all for a better understanding. So we're not just looked at, oh, they're different, you know, what do you stand for and what do you stand for, but what's bringing us together. And it's a very challenging time in our world history, and we need more of the interfaith. We need more understanding between cultures to make a better world.
Thanks, Manjula, for sharing your thoughts on this. Truth is the foundation, as you mentioned. And on this foundation, the goal is peace. And from truth, we need to get to the peace. That is the end point. But there is a process involved. How do you reach? There is a process involved. So that is the action part of it. So truth in action is dharma. Truth as experience is peace. Truth as understanding is non-violence. So it's nothing but different forms of truth as emotion is love. So from getting from truth, the foundation, and building the superstructure and experiencing the peace, non-violence, love, compassion, duty, social justice, education, all these come in the intermediary. But where does violence, non-violence fit in? Out of all the dharmas, you know, truth in action is dharma. Out of all the actions, highest action is non-violence. Ahimsa paramo dharma. That's what the Vedas say. Out of all the actions, unless you feel the universal oneness, unless you live in that oneness, you can't be really non-violent. Your thoughts, words, and actions. So with this Let us welcome our next speaker. He's a member of Baha'i Faith, founder of and managing director of Human Capital Funds of Funds. And he manages 40 different funds in 5 continents with 354 portfolios. He's an MBA from Stanford, and he's on the Dean's board at
Stanford Business School.
Stanford Business School. Okay. Please welcome Daryn, Dodson.
Thanks, and that's in that order. That was perfect. I'm a Baha'i first, for sure. And it's wonderful to be here with all of you. Thank you, Linda, for your remarks, and Manjula. It's great to have another Washingtonian. I grew up in the city of Washington, D.C.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so I was thinking about coming to visit the center there. And,
You must.
I would love to. And in terms of just a global kind of introduction to some of the principles of the Baha'i Faith, it almost felt like we were sitting in a circle. Well, it does feel like we're sitting in a circle at one of the many Baha'i events here, because there are often non-Baha'is there, and that's a really important part of the faith. It's bringing together people across religions, across races, for the oneness of mankind, the oneness of religion. Basically, the underlying principles, as was shared so beautifully earlier, are essentially, root in the love of all mankind within the faith. What I would say, I was just doing a little bit of research, and I came literally right before this panel started, and some of you may have seen that, which is unusual for me, because I'm usually about 15 minutes early. And I did some research, and in 1912, actually October 8th of 1912, one of the founders of the Baha'i Faith was standing about 100 yards from here when he came to give a speech at Memorial Auditorium. And I was just doing a little bit more research. So that was, of course, Gandhi's birthday is just recently. So October 8th, 1912 is when he was standing right there, literally Abdul-Baha. And then Gandhi's birthday being October 6th was profound. I'm sorry, October 2nd. We're in that incredible season of also the Jewish faith of High Holy Days. And so just the energy of the moment is profound to me. I was also looking at the date of Martin Luther King's speech here, it was 52 years ago. And also that being, just such a powerful moment in time. So these drawing of principles across faiths I find just powerful in this moment and in this discussion. What I would also say is that in our work, in the work that we do within finance as an organization, this is organization that is inspired by the Baha'i Faith as well as the principles of Gandhi and Martin Luther King, an organization that I founded called Illumine Capital, as was mentioned earlier. Appreciate that. One of the things that we strive to do every day is to think about the ways in which violence in the financial system happens. And it's often one of those things that is so quiet and so understudied that we, without analysis, one of the key principles of the Baha'i Faith and other faiths is the balance of science and religion, to really do the research. And actually that was the words in the speech that Abdul-Baha gave when he was here. He's thanking Stanford in some ways and the scholars that are here for pursuing the edges of science so that we could better understand truth. And rooted in that truth also apply the principles of love and compassion and other things. And as we try to strive to embody some of those things within the work that we do as a firm, one of the things that we found is that of the $69 trillion in the asset management business, only 1.3% are managed by women and people of color firms. So that's about $35 trillion under what we'd expect by random chance, which means that there's a terrific problem. And that problem rooted in the asset management business that then owns most of the other businesses in the world, if it's not led by a philosophy of love and nonviolence, then we have a big problem, a big understudied problem. So with a research team of 4 Stanford professors, we took on research to understand why that problem persists and exists. And one of the things that we found is that implicit bias, and this is a book written by one of our co-authors who's here at Stanford named Dr. Jennifer Eberhardt. And we explored together across many different systems the way in which people who want to love each other essentially miss that opportunity because of their own biases. Within finance, what we found is that people will lose money before they'll invest in people that are black, which is a profound thing. That means pension funds, sovereign wealth funds across the world, are systematically making decisions looking at 2 equally qualified funds, maybe run by a woman or a person of color versus a white male-run fund. And we systematically tested 180 asset allocators secretively. We got approval from the research department to be able to apply science to help people understand that without intervention, without some of the principles that we're describing and talking about, they will miss not only the financial investment, but more importantly, they'll miss the opportunity to connect with the humanity of other people within financial markets. And what we found is that in many movements, without this additional analysis, helps activists and entrepreneurs and people seeking justice around the world to refine their strategies, knowing how imbalanced the ownership of asset management is, so that it can effectively apply pressure across the systems in which it occurs. So one of the things, the areas in which we think about bias coming about and occurring are one within the education system. Teachers that love students and want to treat them equitably and equally. When they go into the classroom, what we find is that this is particular data within the United States, whether they're black or white, they systematically over-discipline and expel only for discretionary expulsion. So if a student brings a knife or gun to school, they all get expelled at the same rate, pretty much. If you give the teacher discretion, it's 4 times the rate of black boys in K through 12 that are expelled systematically by white and black teachers for the exact same infraction as their white counterparts. So when we think about what justice looks like, and we think about the companies that are funding technologies that are rapidly scaling to reach kids, and some of the companies we invest in are indeed in India and in other places around the world where these problems also persist and exist. If we don't educate those people that are funding the companies to know about the way in which their mind tricks them into missing the humanity of other people, then we have a big problem, because we're scaling bias or achievement gaps instead of scaling the closing of those gaps. And health systems that many know much better than me on our panel, the way that doctors interact with patients without even with good intentions, and that's the really important, but people seeking to love each other also succumb at times without training to their own biases and treat different patients that are darker skinned than others differently. and that leads to tremendous consequences within health systems. We see the same thing, earlier background in my context. I started doing systematic testing of large portfolios in the subprime lending market in the United States, and trying to understand with churches and other faith-based institutions how to educate their congregations on not how to get out of predatory loans that many of them were targeted by the largest banks in the world to be overpriced into, and then how to use that as a way to break the cycle of poverty. Because when you look at the data in many countries, home ownership is one of the leading ways in which people reach the middle class. And if there's a systematic attack on people's ability to get home ownership, then they won't be able to break that cycle of poverty in a way that is productive and constructive. So that's a little bit of an overview, I think, in the right order of my passion and sort of my faith, how that works into action, which is another principle. Is let's not start and end in words, but action. In the Baha'i faith, and I know it resonates with many of the other panelists, and then think about this applied aspect of it within working organizations. So I'll stop there and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much. So our next panelist just arrived from India. Burra Venkatesan, he is the IAS officer, Indian Administrative Service Officer. He worked for the last 25 years in different roles. He is now the Secretary for Tourism and Culture and Sports Department in Telangana State. And he is a humanitarian. Spirituality and philosophy is his work, and he works in several service projects, and is an author of a book called Selfie of Success, Heart of Happiness, Soul Science. Please welcome Burra Venkatesan.
Good morning, everybody. It's my privilege to be with all of you.
Morning in India.
Yes.
Good afternoon here.
Okay.
That question in the morning.
Yeah. So, to me, the interfaith symbol, if we have to find anybody in the world, the Gandhi lives as the best possible symbol. Because he always used to say, I don't want my house to be walled end to end. I want as many windows as possible so that the cultures of various countries, various faiths should freely move around. But I don't want to get lifted off by any of the cultures, including my own. So let the heirs of all cultures come as freely as possible, but I don't want to get lifted by anybody, including my own. So that kind of free mingling with the cultures, understanding the best of every culture, is a real epitome of interfaith unity, interfaith tolerance, or whatever you want to call. But more than tolerance, he lived as a unity. Then when you call tolerance, that means there's some kind of negativity in it. Whereas you want to call it as unity, then it's a conversion, inclusion in it, rather than exclusion. So why this interfaith? In fact, to my knowledge, the various faiths which got established in various points of time in human evolution, if you see, they have done more disservice to humanity than the service to humanity. That's what I feel. Somehow more people are killed in the name of religion than they serve the people. Whether it is crusade wars, whether it is jihad wars, whether it is some other wars, whatever name you call, they did more disservice than the service to the humanity. We started this religious inquiry. We started the inquiry about unknown. When we started to understand the unknown, so various points of time, as we could understand at that point of time, some dharma, the code of conduct of life, got established as a religion. Whether it is Paleolithic age or the latest being the Sikh religion which came in 12th, 13th century. Baha'i is also there, but major religions means which have millions and millions of followers. So we have, like that, somebody can say Scientology is also religion. So we can keep on adding, but the major religions where few millions practicing. So if you see these kind of religious faiths are taken, so they have come in various points of time addressing the problems of that time. So Hindu, then some of them got lost, like Mayan religions and then Aztec religions, they have gone lost. So now what we have is maybe 5-10 of them still surviving, but there's so much of commonality in them. So without celebrating the commonality they have, we are trying to find what is the speciality in each of them and trying to boast out on that and trying to fight it out that mine is the best. So everybody has to come into my room. So it's part of the same house. All religions are like one house. They are like different living quarters. So instead of enjoying the commonality of it, each one of us trying to showcase mine is the best, so you please come to my side. If you are not agreeing with my book, then you are lost. If you are agreeing with my book, then there is no need for other books. So this kind of conflict is coming in day in and day out throughout the world. So why these religions have come in the first place? To understand the unknown, to live a life of order, not to have a conflicting world. So this conflict will end when we know the unity of religions than the speciality of religions. So that unity was always symbolized, always cherished by Mahatma Gandhi. The way he used to welcome people and the way he used to live, it was never a religious life. It was more a spiritual life, more a philosophical life. So for him, God is like unity of all known things. Suppose if I want to know the God, then I must know the Islamic way of worship, I must know the Christian way of worship, I must know Jain way of worship, I must know Hindu way of life, I must know the Buddhist way, whatever. Because then only I'll try to understand the completeness of God, rather than trying to follow one and then leave the rest. And then the worst is that saying that this way is the right. This is the only way which is the best. So there the problem comes. So because of this confusion, you have seen the other side, the other extreme side, like Nietzsche philosophy. Say death of God is the Superman Uberman will come out. Then once God is dead, then the humans will rise. As long as God is living, humans will never grow because they will always think God is there to protect me. God is guiding me. God is taking care. Where is He? Nobody knows. So it's our way of thinking which created this Godhead. So unless you had everything put together, then also you may not reach a minute scale of God. When you want to divide it, then you are going further down. So the inquiry should be so deep that you will get into the core of it, or include everything, go on include everything, then also you can reach. Either you go on adding everything what is available, or go on understanding deeper and deeper, then also you will get, like atom if you see, go on divide, in the end you will get to that smallest possible fraction, where you will get the entire universe in the smallest particle. Or go on adding everything, then you will get the best possible picture. So this is the crux of the universe. Either you have to go to the lowest possible level or you have to go to highest possible level. In between, if you start fighting, then there will be lots of confusion. So the interfaith dialogue should start happening. We believe way back in 1993, Vivekananda, when he came here, he entered the entire world saying that brothers and sisters of America, first time a person calling unknown people, calling them as their own brothers and sisters was honored. That one word endeared him to the entire world. 1893 in Chicago, when the World Parliament of Religions was held, he came all the way and then he addressed. So like that, we should have continuous dialogues to understand, to include as many possible faiths as possible. Let us be See, like it's a big house, like a giant family system. If you have a big house, so one son got married, you will give one special room, one room for his privacy. Then one more person is married, you will give one more room. That doesn't mean that he should not come to the common area. He should come and enjoy the common area. So the common area is so big enough. Your specialized room is small, very small. So the common area is 90%. Your individual rooms are 2 to 3%. So why live in that small, that 2-3%? This common area is also part of your this thing. So we are becoming too restrictive in our thinking, whether we call it a Sanatana Dharma or we call it some other names. So we should bring as much unity as possible to understand in others while respecting your own religion. You should also appreciate the other's viewpoint. The moment you say, mine is the best, there is nothing to be learned from others, then that is the fall of humanity. That's what we are witnessing today. Because there is no one common way, especially in unknown path. Known path, say, okay, what is the best route from Chicago to say San Francisco? You can say the best possible route. This is a known place. But if you are going to unknown place, you should explore all the possible routes. Then only you will know what is the best. So this unknown thing is not being practiced properly. So Mahatma Gandhi's way of this thing, let's open all the windows open in our house. Don't be stuffed. Don't be in one part of that big house. We have a palace. So why to live in a small room that is given for your particular for your privacy, like a bathroom. Suppose if you want to go to bathroom, you want to have privacy, that's why a small room is created as bathroom. But you want to live all the time in bathroom, then what will happen? You will miss the entire house. That's what is happening today. So that is the way we have to understand the interfaith nature. We are this part of that big universe, and we don't even know even the minuscule part of it. So that's what whether Einstein said or whether Newton said, what we knew is not even a drop of a ocean, but what we have to know is millions and millions of oceans. So with that open mind, if we work together, then interfaith movement will come, dialogue should happen, talk to each other, understand each other. Let's build that common distilled wisdom from all the religions possible. And that is our common area. So let individual rooms live and then come and enjoy here, eat, drink, sleep. When you want to have privacy, then go to your room. But if you want to get the best cooperation from everybody, come into the room, live as much as possible in the common areas. Then whether it is starvation, suppose for example, one example I'll give and then close. See, suppose if you say about starvation, for example, if you take Islam, for example, it says, I read more or less about all religious books, more or less, maybe cursorily, not too deep into everything, but Islam says very clearly, if any of the people, which is about those days when it was written, at least 40 houses around you, if anybody is starving, you have no right to take a meal. Islam has the best possible, what you call, about the brotherhood, called universal brotherhood. If any one of the people living in your neighborhood is not eating a meal, you have no right to eat your meal. See the glory they have told. But now today, we think something else. Then if Christianity, the first word is serve. Don't do anything to others what you don't want others to do to you. So do everything what you want from others, you have to do to others. Then only they can reciprocate. Like Annam Parabrahma Swarupam, for example. The food is like God. So if anybody is starving, then that you are not having the actual this thing. You are not really venerating the God. Suppose even if you take Sikhism, the main three principles, if you see, one the Chako, is that share a meal all the time. That's why they have langar system everywhere. So if you see any religion like this, the first thing is take care of the disadvantaged groups, take care of the starvation problems, take care of the health problems, take care of the women, take care of everything. But these are the common areas. We are leaving all this. Okay, if you are practicing some religion, you have to dress like this, then you have to go like this, you have to bow like this, then you have to wear like this. So the externalities have become more important than the internalities. Religion is more an internalizing issue than an external appearance. So external manifestation is becoming more important than the internalization of the religion. This is what Mahatma Gandhi said. So let's go to that Godhead with open mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Venkateswaran. He brings the point that Mahatma said that India attained freedom, but not attained the true freedom.
Yes.
Meaning, India attained the political freedom, freedom from the British oppression. But he also wanted complete freedom is not done till you have internal freedom from your own vices, kama, krodha, moha, mada, masteries, anger, envy, jealousy, lust, greed. The internal enemies, till you get rid of them. And then love all, serve all, universal oneness, the feeling comes in. When people's minds expand to include others, that time the true freedom dawns. So till that time there is no true freedom. So that's why this generation, that is us, has to start the second movement, freedom of independence movement in India and elsewhere too.
Could we have the freedom of everybody in the audience to ask some questions and make some comments?
We are giving about 15 minutes.
We
per
have
person.
only 15 minutes left.
Yeah.
So religion, good and bad, positive and negative. Negative side we see dividing, exclusiveness, compartments, causing crusades, destruction, mass killings, horrors. The negative side. Positive side, it has done a lot of good. Takes people towards the spirituality, that oneness and all that. Both are there with us. Why? Animals don't have a religion. In the phylogenesis of evolution, when we have been a plant, we have been an inanimate object, animate object, plants, we have been animals, lower animals, higher animals, till up to human being, that means up to animal level, we went through programmed evolution, meaning animals react. How do they react? By instincts. Survival mode. They have survival instincts. They protect themselves. When they are hungry, they go and kill something and eat. And they reproduce their genesis and continue. Humans also have the same animal qualities because they are our ancestors. Animals are our ancestors. But we were given something special that these animals don't have. That's called intellect, discriminating power of good and bad, and act accordingly. What is good, what is bad? If you go to the fundamental definition of good and bad, as I understand it is, anything that unites us is good, anything that divides us is bad. If we just use that as a differentiating point, what is good and bad, we can understand. Integration is good, analysis and division is the problem area. So, it is not the religion that is bad. It is not the religion that is the problem. But it is the human minds that have a tendency, the purpose the intellect was given to go further and have the creative power of the creator was instilled in the human being. And through that power of creativity, he can become divine himself and be one with the divinity. That is the power given to him. And that power, that discriminative power to evolve further from his limited existence to unlimited, from limitedness to unlimited. When we misuse, go back to our ancestral tendencies of limitedness. This is mine, thine, thy's yours, and this separateness. So till human beings evolve to that, dissolve these boundaries and evolve to the universal oneness, these problems persist. So it's not the religions that should change or we should say no to, but it is the human minds in religion that is the problem. Periodically reformers come to make changes. Buddha came, there was so much ritualism in Hinduism. Buddha came as a reformer, didn't come to start a new religion. But Buddha said no to rituals, Buddha said no to idol worship, but his disciples, after he died, he put his idol and started praying, and there are so much rituals in Buddhism. So what is said and what is practiced is completely different. So that is what the way it happens in any religion. So the idea is to maintain the purity. With this understanding, and let us open ourselves. We have about 12 minutes for some questions. We can take 3 or 4 questions.
Let's take several.
Kalwala.
1, 2.
Yeah, we have 3, 4 questions. We'll limit that 4
Yes.
questions.
My question is about coming from India and doing an in-depth study of Mahatma Gandhi and Buddhism. The theme is around dharma versus adharma, ahimsa versus himsa. As you know, Hinduism is the name given to us by invaders, and the true name is Sanatana Dharma. The essential theme is dharma, eternal duties of God, and it applies to all living beings. Having said that, Mahatma Gandhi has challenged Britishers through hereditary letters. Britishers that their adharmic practices, how they're taking away putting the country under stress, and then invoking millions of people, their duty, dharma, what is their duty, and then mobilizing them to challenge Britishers through non-violence. And then also in Indian mythology, we have Krishna and Rama, both of them, the avatars of God. They have taken a violent way of waging the wars to establish dharma. So this is a big conflict that Mahatma Gandhi way of achieving versus the gods, how they achieve. I want to hear that we do not, Mahatma Gandhi in my view is much beyond the gods. He has taken a path, ahimsa, to as much as he's done the gods to establish dharma.
Could you come to the question?
The question is that I have heard from you guys, but we have not heard the theme of Mahatma Gandhi's around the concept of why he is.
I think I understand the question. Let me repeat the way I understood.
Yes.
But please, okay, but let's give other people a chance to speak.
No, I will repeat his question so
Yeah.
that it is clear to everybody. Rama, Krishna, all these avatars came in, and they fought wars. Krishna is the central figure in Kurukshetra war. Rama with war with Ravana. These are the stories of the epics. And Mahatma Gandhi's non-violence. How does it fit together? Is that the question? If I understand well? Okay. Let us see whether any of the panelists wants to take
Could
the
we have like 3 questions and then reply? Because otherwise I'm afraid we won't hear
We're out
from,
of time.
yeah. Could we hear from like 3 or 4 people in the audience and then if there's time for us, we've already had a lot of
Maybe
turns.
quick questions.
Yeah, here's
Yeah.
one.
So for Linda, I have a question. Why you say the schools don't support non-violence and violence studies? And for Dylan, I have a question. You are working with the non-profit organizations also and managing their funds. You are, right?
Yes.
So some of the churches, they promote the conversion, and how do you handle that situation if you know that certain outfit is conversion, pro, how do you manage their funds, or do you say, no, we don't want to handle your funds? So those are my two questions.
Just maybe a couple more.
Okay.
So there's some debate whether the younger children should learn about the genocide and non-violence, because some people think that they aren't mature enough. So what are your opinions on that, and how can elementary schools incorporate the curriculum?
Talking about religion, I think Mahatma Gandhi took care of the untouchables, the poor, reached out to the last person in the line. Probably that is the best religion. That's the best way of following religion, in my eyes. And what do you think to that?
Just could we have one more person in the back row, and then we'll see if we have time to discuss.
I'm curious to know about the relationship between Gandhi and the respect of King being a Christian, and how that plays within the African American experience. Because we're hearing a lot, but the culture of African Americans is rooted in the Christian faith. So I'm curious to know how that balances and works for African Americans in respecting Gandhi and the work that he's done.
Such great questions. I wish we.
Okay, let us have the panelists pick an answer for each question, and then at least one panel member will answer one question. Which would you like to pick?
I think the last question, which is what this whole panel has been about, the Gandhiji interfaith, he truly respected, studied, and especially, coming out of a British rule in India, religion was one thing and politics was another, and he used politics, but that doesn't mean he didn't understand, leave alone tolerate, believe, or give equal respect to the religion. So I think there, for me, two different things: the politics that got us the independence, and he had true respect and understanding for Christians.
Anything you would like to pick? One question you pick and answer.
I had a question for Linda, so.
It's not a soundbite, why aren't schools teaching, but there's a famous quote, though, in the field where an educator in nonviolence said, somebody asked him, we are, oh God, I didn't get it right, we're literate, but we don't know, we haven't studied nonviolence, we don't know how to be nonviolent. And he said, that's because they teach us to read in the schools. Actually, that's the wrong quote. He said it much better than I did. But the question of how to do it, it's a thing that just like finance, changing the financial system, just like running a movement for the farm workers, you have to get down in deep and dirty into the organization of schools and the different interest groups and who's running the university, and you have to work with that. It's not like, oh, if only they just had a little light bulb go on, they would teach nonviolence. It's complicated. It's like all things in this world run by many interests.
As an educator, I just have to say that we do teach nonviolence in our schools. It's hit and miss. It's not universal. It's not mandated. But there are a number of us out there that are doing
That's a very important thing that you've just said.
I just want to reassure you.
Yeah.
Gandhi is a film I've shown many times in my classroom. Martin Luther King's speeches many times. The history of the civil rights movement. Gandhi's resistance in India. A lot of that has been witnessed by our students.
Thank you so much for the question. So just to differentiate the parts of the talk, so the building of the Baha'i principles of oneness of all humanity in the first part, and then specifically there are a number of organizations that are inspired by Baha'i principles and the principles of, like they would be inspired by the principles of Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Christian principles, etc. And non-profit designation does not allow a particular religion or faith to channel money into, but it does allow for the application of these principles and like the principle of oneness in society and other things. So in terms
Conversion. She asked about conversions.
oh, conversions. Oh, and what was it?
Some institutions in different religions, they believe in conversion, force people to change their religion. So would you handle their portfolios?
So when I say this is Illumin Capital and not the Baha'i Faith. The question is for Illumin Capital specifically. So we haven't accepted any money from any religious institution so far. So we'd have to learn about that and what they're doing. I think conversion is one aspect of the things we'd have to be very careful about with the people that invest in us. But there are a whole lot of other things we want to look at, including that with any investor that we would talk to.
He asked in his question also, like what Gandhi stood. In fact, I told that very clearly. Gandhi never stood for the external manifestation of religion. He always stood for the internalization of human spirit. The highest level of religion is to serve, to understand, to respect everybody. That's what he stood for. So whether it is serving the untouchability or serving the underprivileged, whether those days in India, the leprosy was a big problem. Nobody even used to go close to them, but Gandhi used to go and serve them personally, not organize the service. He used to do personally. So like that, the way he practiced religion as a humanism, not as a ritualism. So the wars and the way, why wars will come, when I say my religion is better than you, then the war starts. When I say I have something and I respect yours, both let's sit and understand each other, where is the fight? There is no fight. So that's how, whether it is Kabir, whether it is Mahatma Gandhi, these people symbolize the understanding of each other's viewpoint, than trying to elevate one's own point. So that is the highest form of the religious belief and the religious way of practice.
Okay. I have 1 minute to answer the most difficult question he posed about wars, non-violence, and how Kurukshetra war and Ramayana war took place and this kind of thing. Non-violence is not just external, it is internal. In thought, words, and actions. Conflict, as long as there is mind, there will be conflicts. Though we try to avoid conflict, there will be conflict. How do you handle conflict? In Sanatana Dharma gives 4 stages: Sama, Dana, Veda, Dandopayas. Sama, by sitting together and negotiating, knowing each other's point of view. Most of the problems will solve there. By good communication, expressing what the problem is, listening what the other person is saying, and mutually, then that solves the problem. Dana, that means there is something to gain and lose. So they are fighting for a property or a territory or whatever. You give something, the other person gives something, a win-win solution, done. Bheda. Bheda means there's somebody, the conflict comes from negativity of people. Negativity against negativity produces conflict. So if you reduce the other person's negativity by your positivity, not your negativity against other negativity will increase negativity, totality of the negativity. So others' negativity, if you increase your positivity in front of it, this positivity will change the negative person into positivity. Then you will arrive at a solution. That's called Bheda. Then Dandopaya, meaning when everything fails, all this emissary sharing, giving and all this fails, when the issue is proper dharma, dharma means to protect the world, The issue is protection of the greater good of the world. Which is the greater good? If war was the only solution for the greater good of the world, then it becomes like a cancer surgery. That war is not, it is a justified war, and that war is cancer surgery. That is what is recommended. Kurukshetra is a cancer surgery. Ramayana war is a cancer surgery. Because they exhausted all these things. Because Rama said at one point, before he goes to the war, Ravana's brother came and surrendered to Rama. And Rama said, I'm giving you, he coronated him as king of Lanka. Then Lakshmana gets a doubt, saying, what if Ravana comes and surrounds you, surrenders to you? He said, I will give my Ayodhya. He said, I will give my kingdom, Rama's kingdom, I will give my kingdom. He didn't even have a second thought. Meaning, so that is the point of view you should understand. When there are times when we exhaust all the things for the greater good of the world, you have to fight a battle. Then there is no choice. The same Gandhi who is non-violent asked the Indians to fight with the British. Why did he ask? Indian army, he asked to fight with the British. But he could have taken advantage of it. But who is the greater enemy? Is it the Hitlers, Nazi Germany, or the British at that time? The British were the enemies internally. He didn't take that advantage. He said, he asked the Indian military to fight with the British for that, because he knows who is the greater enemy. So that is where the dharma comes.
Could I add something to what you just said?
Yeah.
There are many ways to understand a text like the Ramayana or the Bhagavad Gita in the Mahabharata. We've just heard one view of it. Gandhi had a very specific interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita that answered your question, how could he be nonviolent and love this text, which ends in one of the worst slaughters of history, okay? He had a very specific interpretation that answered that question and that did not support the literal slaughter of war in any circumstances, even when they were so-called no choice. So it's a slippery slope when you start saying, when there's no choice, we have to have a war. I just want to say there are many interpretations, so don't think that there's just one.
Thank you. One last word about conversion. Somebody raised the conversions. Conversions, on a culture, a way of living is a culture of a group of people for a long period of time. That culture develops a religion over a period of time. So the culture and religion are interrelated. If you change the religion of a person, a group of people, to something else, you are changing their culture. It is a cultural invasion on somebody else's culture. So religious conversion is a cultural invasion, and that should be viewed as such, and it is violence. Thank you.